My name is Ivy Myers, and I'm 32 years old. The smoke alarm woke me at 2:47 in the morning, and by the time I got my shoes on, the hallway outside my apartment was already black, with smoke so thick I couldn't see my own hands in front of me. I don't remember running down 4 flights of stairs. I don't remember the cold concrete of the parking lot under my bare feet, because I'd lost my shoes somewhere between the 3rd floor and the street. I just remember standing there, wrapped in a stranger's blanket, watching orange light crawl up the windows of the apartment I'd lived in for 6 years, and thinking that everything I own was turning to ash while I stood there breathing. The fire department got it under control before it spread to the neighboring units. But my apartment, Unit 4B, was gutted. Everything gone. My grandmother's quilt, the photo albums from my wedding that never happened, my late father's old record collection that I'd kept in a milk crate since I was 22, gone. I sat on the curb wrapped in that blanket for almost 2 hours before I even thought to call anyone. And when I finally did, the first person I called was my mother. She picked up on the 4th ring, groggy, annoyed that I was calling so late. I told her what happened, that my apartment had burned down, that I had nothing, not even a change of clothes, and that I didn't know where I was going to sleep that night. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then she said in the flattest voice I have ever heard come out of her mouth, "Not our problem. You should have been more careful." And then she hung up. I sat there holding my phone, staring at the screen, waiting for it to ring back, waiting for her to say she was joking, that she'd be there in 20 minutes with a thermos of coffee and a spare set of clothes. The phone never rang again. I didn't have the energy to be angry that night. I was too busy shaking, too busy watching firefighters walk in and out of the building with axes and hoses, too busy trying to process the fact that everything I'd built for myself had disappeared in under an hour. A woman from the Red Cross gave me a voucher for a motel 3 blocks away, and I spent the rest of the night lying on a stiff mattress, staring at a water stain on the ceiling, replaying my mother's voice over and over. Not our problem. Should have been more careful. As if a fire was something you could outsmart. As if I'd left a candle burning on purpose. 2 days later, I got a call from a man who introduced himself as Grant Holloway, a fire investigator with the county. He asked if I could meet him at the building so he could walk me through what they'd found. I remember thinking that was strange, that investigators usually just filed a report and moved on. But I said yes, because I needed answers. I needed to know how my whole life had ended up in a dumpster outside a burned-out building. When I got there, the smell hit me before anything else. That wet, charred chemical smell that clings to your throat. Grant was standing near what used to be my front door, holding a clipboard, wearing a county badge clipped to his jacket. He was maybe 45, gray at the temples, with the kind of calm, measured voice that made you feel like whatever he said next was going to matter. He shook my hand and told me he was sorry for what I'd been through. Then he asked me a question that made the hair on my arm stand up. Do you know who had access to your apartment in the last week? A friend, an ex, a maintenance worker, anyone with a key or a way in. I told him no one, that I lived alone, that the only people with a key were me and my landlord. He nodded slowly, the way people do when they already suspect the answer isn't the full truth. Then he said the fire hadn't started the way most accidental fires start. It hadn't started in the kitchen, or from an overloaded outlet, or from anything I owned. It had started near the back bedroom window, in a spot with no wiring, no appliances, nothing that should have been able to ignite on its own. We found something at the scene, he said, something that doesn't belong in a normal house fire. He reached into a folder tucked under his clipboard and pulled out a clear evidence bag. Inside, it was a small, half-melted object, and the moment I saw what it was, my stomach dropped straight through the concrete beneath my feet. My mouth went dry. My hands started to shake the instant I recognized what the investigator had carefully lifted from the ashes. My heart seemed to stop for a moment, because I knew exactly what I was looking at. There was no possibility that I had mistaken it for something else. Even though the fire had twisted it into an ugly piece of blackened metal, the shape was still unmistakable to me. It was a small silver fox keychain, its edges melted and warped by the intense heat. Years earlier, I had bought that exact keychain as a birthday present for my younger stepbrother, Weston. At the time, we were still speaking, still pretending that our relationship could survive all the tension that had slowly been building between us. Everything changed after he came to me, begging for $12,000 to pay off a gambling debt he had buried himself in. I refused, because I knew giving him money would only encourage him to continue making the same reckless choices. After that conversation, he disappeared from my life. We stopped talking completely, and I hadn't seen either him or that keychain in well over a year. I explained all of this to Grant, my voice barely louder than a whisper, because I was still trying to understand what it meant. He listened without interrupting, quietly writing notes across his clipboard before finally looking up at me. His expression told me there was something even worse coming. "There's more," he said. He explained that the fire investigators had completed their examination of the apartment, and the evidence pointed towards something much darker than anyone had first believed. The the flames hadn't started because of faulty wiring, an overloaded outlet, or an unfortunate accident. The burn patterns told a completely different story. Someone had deliberately poured an accelerant along the base of my bedroom window before setting it on fire. The damage matched gasoline, not an electrical malfunction. Every clue indicated that the fire had been intentionally started by someone who wanted the building to burn. According to Grant, whoever had entered my apartment poured the fuel, ignited it, and then fled the scene. During that process, the keychain had somehow been left behind. Whether it slipped from a pocket by accident or had been intentionally dropped, nobody could say with certainty. Grant admitted that investigators sometimes found objects deliberately left at crime scenes as warnings or messages. He carefully suggested that possibility without claiming it as fact. I stared at him for several long seconds before asking the only question that came into my mind. What kind of message does someone send by burning another person's home? Grant slowly shook his head. I honestly don't know. Neither did I. Nothing about the situation made sense anymore. That evening, after spending hours replaying every detail in my mind, I called my mother again. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped my phone before she answered. The moment I heard her voice, I told her everything. I explained what the investigators had discovered, described the silver fox keychain they had recovered, and finally asked her directly whether she knew anything about Weston being anywhere near my apartment before the fire. Silence filled the call. It wasn't the kind of silence caused by surprise. It was the silence of someone deciding how much of the truth they were willing to admit. Before she even spoke, I knew. Then the confession began, piece by piece. She admitted Weston had gone to my apartment the week before the fire. According to her, he believed I kept emergency cash hidden somewhere inside the apartment. He thought if he searched carefully enough, he would find money that I wouldn't immediately notice was missing. He hadn't gone there to visit me. He had gone there intending to steal from me. She quickly insisted that burning the apartment had never been part of his plan. She claimed he had been searching through my belongings when one of my neighbor's dogs suddenly started barking outside. Thinking someone had noticed him, he panicked. While rushing through the apartment, he accidentally knocked over a container of paint thinner stored beneath my kitchen sink. Instead of simply running away, fear took over. Worried that investigators might find fingerprints or other evidence proving he had broken into my apartment, Weston made the worst decision of his life. He intentionally started a small fire, believing it would destroy the evidence connecting him to the burglary. He assumed the flames would remain contained long enough to erase his tracks before burning out. Instead, the fire spread faster than he could have imagined. Within minutes, it had grown into the inferno that destroyed everything I owned. I could barely breathe as I listened. Finally, I asked my mother one question. How long have you known? Her answer shattered whatever trust I still had left. She admitted Weston had arrived at her house the very next morning, frightened, shaking, and crying as he confessed everything that had happened. From that moment on, she knew exactly who had destroyed my apartment. Instead of telling him to surrender to the police, she told him to stay quiet. She convinced him that the investigation would probably never identify the person responsible. She believed the truth would disappear along with the ashes, and that eventually I would stop asking questions. That was when I finally understood why she had sounded so cold when I called her after losing everything. She hadn't been heartless because she didn't care. She had been protecting Weston. While I stood outside, wrapped in a stranger's blanket with nowhere to sleep, watching firefighters battle the flames that erased my home, nearly everything I owned, and the last physical memories I had of my father, my mother already knew exactly who was responsible, and instead of standing beside me, she chose to stand between her son and the consequences of what he had done.